Jeff, thank you very much for joining me
You're
for
welcome.
this chat. What were you, 3 races into the season?
Yeah, where have they gone, by the way?
I know.
Blink
Quick,
of an
wasn't
eye.
it? Quick. That's the beauty of the double race
Yeah, there you
weekends,
go.
isn't it? But we had a good chat. I'm going to catch up in Saudi about things yourself. And how would you kind of assess the start to the year in Formula E?
Well, I think there's 2 starts to the year. There's a start of the year off the track, and then you've obviously got to start the year on the track. So you're right, 3 races in. So on the track, Mexico, 2 races in Diriyah in Saudi Arabia. And I think on the track, pretty much exactly as you expect from Formula E. So I think we're 3 races in, 3 different winners, 3 different teams have won. I mean, very, very unpredictable in terms of who's going to come out on top. So properly excited about that.
Yeah.
And then I think there's off the track, and off the track, some really good momentum. So fan base continues to grow. So we had some good news in the off season that the fan base has grown by another 30, 40 million, which is excellent around the world.
Yeah.
And then we also learnt recently that we've retained our number 1 sport for ESG, so environmental, social and governance. So that kind of stuff's really important for the team. So I think the team are in a good place.
Yeah.
And then on the track, as you would expect, high competition.
Yeah, because that's, as you well know, I'm new to the sport, thoroughly enjoying my start. But I know the start to any kind of sporting season, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of anxiety as well, in particular with new sports as to kind of how it's going to start. So would you, I suppose the question I'm asking, did it hit the mark?
So I think, look, the team worked really hard in the off-season and they brought another 40 broadcasters on around the world. So I think from a viewership point of view, we're probably ahead of where we thought we would be. So that's great. You weren't on board at the end of last season, but we ended last season in London. Yeah. And in that very final race, there was still 4 teams and 4 drivers that could win the championship. Yeah. So when you start the new season, for me, I'm hoping for full stadia. So I want, every seat sold, and they have been. You want incredibly competitive racing, but you want safe racing. So no big accidents, all drivers safe, and 3 different winners. So I think we got out of the block strong. Next race, Sao Paulo. Hopefully we keep up the momentum. Yeah.
I mean, I've really loved being a part of it. I have to say, it's been an eye-opening kind of experience, submersing myself into a brand new sport and learning about it along the way as well. What in your eyes sets Formula E apart, like from other sports? You love football, you love a bit of golf, I love golf. How does it set itself apart in your eyes?
Well, first of all, brilliant to have you on board. I love the fact whenever I walk past you, you are properly nerding off. You've got your laptop open and you've got all your stats out in front of you. So you're learning fast, which is amazing.
Thank you.
2 things I would pick. So the levels of competition. So I think compared to most sports, there are normally very dominant players or very dominant teams or managers, and in Formula E that is not the case. So as you're beginning to experience now, as we came into the season, there would have been some strong candidates that were going to come out on top this year. All of a sudden, it's all up in the air again. So everyone's in the mix. But the second thing is, which I think is very different to most sports, is we're not just a sport. So when we were founded, and we're only 9 years old, so we're babies in terms of sports. We were founded to be an elite motor racing sport. Maybe one day the biggest motorsport in the world. We'll see how things go. But on the other side, we were founded to be a platform to educate people around the need to do things differently from a climate point of view. So we're there to educate around climate change, and we're there to be an elite motorsport. Now, I can't think, there might be others. I'm sure people will correct us if there are. But there might be other sports that do. I can't think of another single sport that is a social, environmental platform as well as a sport.
Was that a challenge, kind of? Because I can imagine when you're starting within Formula E, as a sport that you want to kind of take globally as a sustainable sport, doing something great for the environment, but still finding that competitive nature to the races, because that rawness that you see in a driver's eyes when, I don't know, something's gone wrong in quali or something's gone wrong in the race, but then still managing to, I suppose, be a sustainable sport. That must have been a tough battle to find at the time. But the competitive nature to the teams is, it's huge.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I wasn't around at the start. So on a daily basis, I tip my hat to those that founded the sport, because I say 9 years old. And when they founded the sport, you have to remember, this is all electric racing. There would have been hundreds of thousands of electric cars sold globally that year, so almost none. So to have the vision to kind of found the series when EVs were not really a thing, and then 10 years later, for it to be 10, 11, 12 million of them being sold every year now around the world. That's quite an incredible vision. The drivers are always competitive animals, as you know, and in the sport you've got Formula One drivers from the past in there, so people that have raced in Formula One, some will go on to Formula One. Yep. You've got Super Formula drivers, you've got World Endurance Championship drivers, so you've got some of the best drivers in the world. I think they are fixated on winning, but they love being part of something that's bigger than just a sport. Yeah. So if you talk to some of our drivers, like Lucas de Grassi is a great example. Lucas has been there since day one, won the series previously, has his own business, which is called Zero Summit, which is focused on net zero and educating around net zero. So he's gone from being a pure racing driver to now kind of emerging in this space of the environment and climate. So. So no, I think they love being part of something bigger. Yeah,
he's a big voice of the sport. And
incredible, yeah. He's been such an ambassador.
Yeah. Here's a question you're going to like.
Go on.
You're going to enjoy this one. Who's going to win the Formula E title this year? And I want driver and I want team as well.
You don't want much then, do you?
That's what I'm here for.
So even if I had a strong point of view on it, I wouldn't say it because I have to turn up at the races. I've got to look these guys in the eyes at every race. But what I will say is this. So 3 races in, people prior to the season starting would have had a point of view on it, and there would have been some big contenders in people's minds. First race was won by Pascal Wehrlein in Mexico, driving for Porsche. Pascal was an ex-Formula One driver, incredible driver. I watched him win in Mexico and I thought, who's going to beat him this year? It was absolutely flawless. Yeah. We then go to Saudi Arabia. You were there. We had 2 races. First race in Saudi Arabia won by Jake Dennis, so the reigning world driver champion. He looked unbeatable in the first race. Then, as he said, not me, he goes to bed, wakes up in the morning, gets in the car again, and it's like it's a completely different car, completely different day.
Yeah, Porsche engine as well.
Exactly right, with the Andretti team. And then, then Nick Cassidy wins the third race. Now, Nick's podiumed in the first and second race, then wins the third race, so he's currently leading in the title race. Nick's a Super Formula winner in the past, incredible driver from New Zealand, racing for Jaguar. Jaguar looks super strong this year. So I think that's a short way of me saying I haven't got a clue.
Yeah, we've gone around the houses here, Jeff. You've given me nothing.
I haven't got a clue. Well, but also, if you look at Formula E in the past, and if you go back and watch kind of previous series, and I've been doing that recently to look at previous seasons, it really doesn't matter who starts the season strong. Every season bar one has ended at the last race where there are still multiple people who can win it. Yeah. So it kind of, at this stage, it doesn't matter. Ask me again in London who's going to win, and I'll have a stronger point of view.
Yeah, good answer. You got out of that one.
There you go.
I'll let you off. I want to talk to you kind of about the future of motorsport. And a topic actually I've stumbled across this week, which is alternative fuels.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on alternative fuels?
Well, so we're in the alternative fuel business. Yeah. So, electricity and electric is an alternative fuel. So it's a pretty broad term, and within it sits electric, hydrogen, biofuels, propane, loads of different things. When people talk about alternative fuels, and tell me if this isn't what you meant, I think a lot of people are referring to kind of biofuels, like biodiesel and sustainable aviation fuel and things like that. So I think there's, on the biofuel side, I think that's interesting. It's interesting. There are some environmental challenges with biofuels, but I think as kind of a migration fuel, so for industries that are finding it difficult to get off of kind of heavy fuels into electric or hydrogen, I think biofuels are a good migration technology. Maritime industry, aviation industry, they're kind of on that journey at the moment. I think for us, in motorsport, so part of our role is to accelerate away from internal combustion engine cars to electric cars. And to give you some numbers, and might be perfectly right, but they won't be far off. So in terms of kind of global energy emissions, around 15% of those come from road transportation. And pretty much all of the governments around the world now are committed that to decarbonise road transportation, electric is the answer. Which is why you see electric vehicle sales growing by kind of 20% a year. Gotcha. So we're all in on electric. Yeah. But then we have a company that literally is in the office across the road from us, which is Extreme E, and they're racing electric vehicles off-road, and they've recently announced that they're going to move to hydrogen. And I think that's really interesting because you've got, in remote parts of the world, where it's not easy to get electricity, then hydrogen could be a really interesting alternative fuel. So I think that's also quite an interesting route to go. But for us, we're all in on electric because we see our role as trying to help people accelerate that migration away from old-fashioned internal combustion engines into electric cars.
Now, there's lots of...
How was that? Because now you're going into the well of alternative fuels.
Because you gave such a pure answer. That was it, you know. It was absolutely perfect. My next question was, essentially, is this a route that Formula E might take, or is it just electric, is it USB? But you answered it perfectly.
Well, look, and I think we are the only people that can race all electric.
Yeah.
So we're raced under the FIA, so we're a world championship under the FIA, and exclusively we're the only people that can race all electric. So we are absolutely all in on electric. Maybe at some point in the future that changes, but not for the foreseeable future.
I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with you, Jeff, especially in particular in golf. But what we did talk about is like the future of Formula E and what it does kind of look like. And there's big plans.
Yeah. Massive plans. So our growth curve has been pretty steep. Yeah. We took a bit of a knock during lockdown, as most live sports did, and then we've come back super strong. So we're on a really good growth trajectory. And I think I try and break the future down into 3 different areas when I'm talking with my team about it. So the kind of where we race, who we take this to from a fan's point of view, what we're racing, so what's the next generation development of the car looking like, and who's racing. So maybe start at the end. I mean, within my organisation, we're pretty fixated on bringing more diversity into motorsport and more diversity into Formula E. So, we've had women drivers in Formula E before. We have none at the moment. We have no women team principals. We lack ethnic diversity as you walk through the paddock or the teams or look at the grid. So I think opening up the sport to more people is one thing we're pretty fixated on. So the who, I would love to have more diversity in the series. The where, so this year we added 3 venues to the series. So Misano in the Motor Valley in Italy, where they've had the San Marino motorcycle GP before, so very well respected, well known track. That will be cool. Back to China this year. For the first time ever, we'll race in Japan, and actually I think it will be the first sport event ever in the centre of Tokyo. That's pretty exciting. Yeah. So whilst we want a consistent calendar as we move into the future, I think a few more events every year would be good. And in different locations would be good. Yeah. And then I think the third thing is the car. Now, we're very lucky because when you compare us to some other motor racing series, they're working with, I keep saying internal combustion engine, but that's 100-year-old technology in those cars. So getting any betterment out of that technology is very difficult, right? Correct, you're right at the margins. You've got to invest fortunes to get the tiniest little benefit. We're nowhere near that. We're on such a steep curve with EV technology. So at the end of this season, we will announce for next season what's called the Gen 3 Evo, the evolution of the Gen 3 car. And that will look different, look a bit stealthier, look a bit cooler, and the performance of the car will be different. And my team would scream at me if I started going into details, but materially different. Wow. So you're going to see acceleration in these Formula E cars that leaves every other motorsport pretty much for dust. Really? And then 2 years after that, we go into Generation 4, and that will be even more performance, different looking car again, much bigger battery capacity. So then you can be able to race for much longer or deploy more power in the race. So this is the beauty of working with the technology that's so modern, because it's constantly being evolved at the moment. And it's the reason that a lot of our manufacturing partners are in the series, because they're learning stuff on the racetrack that goes straight back into their cars on the road. So I could give examples for all of them, but the one I really like to remind people is Jaguar. So Jaguar learnt stuff in Formula E from their racing cars that they could put back into the I-Pace range, which is their range of electric cars, that increased the battery capacity by 10%. So an over-the-air upgrade that increased the battery capacity of a road car by 10%. I mean, that stuff is super cool. Yeah.
The car element is interesting to me for a number of reasons. Number one, from an athlete's mindset, you're having to adjust constantly. I mean, I know cars develop quickly, but as you said, kind of in F1, there'll be upgrades, here and there. But it sounds like what you're saying as we go through kind of like Gen 3 to Gen 4, it's going to be vast changes in terms of what this car is capable of. Yeah. And the driver has to adapt to that quick.
And so I'm not a driver, never have been, so I can't speak for it personally. But what I do hear from a lot of people who are absolute experts is there were drivers who were amazing in Generation 2.
Gotcha.
that are still getting to grips with what it's like to drive a Gen 3 car.
Yeah.
And there are changes that will happen at the Evo level, so at the end of this season, that will change the dynamics of the car again, and then drivers will have to get used to that. So, potentially there might be drivers that are struggling a bit under this version of the car that do really well on the next because they just get used to it really quickly, and others that don't. But you're right. I think drivers are constantly having to evolve.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about F1 comparisons to FE, because I get this question a lot myself.
Yeah, you and me both.
yeah, I get it constantly. Yeah. So I want to start off with something pretty similar, really, and essentially, how similar are the sports? And we can go into whether it's the pit lanes, the garages, the cars, whatever it is you want to talk about.
Yeah.
But how similar are the two sports?
So in some respects, very. Yeah. I mean, they're open wheel, single seat. World Championship racing car series that sit under the FIA, both sit under the FIA. So kind of our DNA is very similar. I think we're all electric. So I'm going into differences already, but let me do something.
Before they're similar.
So they're similar, right? Yeah. So the cars, they don't look the same, but they look similar. They're open-wheeled and they're single-seater racing cars, so they look similar. Correct, yeah. They have 10 teams, we have 11 teams. They have Mercedes and Ferrari and Red Bull and people like that, and we have. My teams always get upset because I can't mention them all, but Porsche and Jaguar and Nissan and people like that. So we have our own we similar sized teams, but very different teams. Where I think there are some big differences would be, I was going to say where we race actually, but we started out as kind of street circuit, city circuit DNA. Yep. They were very much kind of big stadia, big fixed circuits, but they're changing a bit there. So they've started to introduce more and more street circuits to kind of follow our lead. So with Las Vegas being a great example last year. So that's an area where we have been different, but we're starting to come a bit closer together. Yeah. Maybe the bigger differences I would say is we obviously are EV racing. And they're not. They're racing combustion engine cars. Yeah. The money and the costs are markedly different, right? So I think last time I looked, average value of an F1 team was between 1.5 and $2 billion US. Cost cap's about $145 million a year, and that excludes driver cost and stuff like that. So if you compare that to us, for a team trying to get in and get a team in Formula E, you're probably looking at kind of between 30 and 40 million US dollars compared to F1, and our cost cap is about $14 million. Gotcha. So less than 10%. Yeah. And that kind of cost profile flows its way through to fans as well. So buying grandstand tickets or hospitality tickets, there's a massive difference between the two. Yeah. I'm a huge F1 fan, by the way, so this is not meant as a disparaging remark, but I would say FE is kind of inclusive motor racing, so trying to be for everyone, and that's reflected in our fan base. Maybe I'll talk about that in a second. Reflected in our fan base. Formula 1 is much more exclusive. Okay. It's very chic, it's very high end, it sees itself as kind of the elite end of motorsport.
And what do you mean then by the fan base element?
Just that we have quite a different fan base. So actually most of motorsport, not just Formula 1, but most of motorsport tends to be traditionally male. Yeah. And skews a little bit older. Okay. Whereas Formula E's fan base is, I think half of our fan base is under 45 years of age, which by the way for me feels very young. Not so much for you, but for me, your birthday tomorrow, you're creeping up. But that feels very young. And we skew about 50-50, male, female, which is very unusual for motorsport. Yeah. So whatever we're doing is attracting a slightly different motorsport fan. That wasn't
like a conscious, move them really by the sport? It just organically kind of happened?
It's a great, obviously I don't know because I wasn't there at the start. It's a great question. I think the conscious move was to be different. Okay. There's no point creating something to appeal to exactly the same people. Formula 1 doing a great job of attracting a certain fan base. They're 75 years old. Yeah. So we're not going to turn up and pull all their old fans away from them. That's not going to happen. No. So we had to attract a different audience. So a lot of the things we do, whether it's the way we do qualifying, the environmental platform, where we race, how we race, the development of the cars, is designed to attract a slightly different audience, and that's worked.
Yeah. So I want to get back to the comparisons between Formula 1 and Formula E. What advice or what would you have to say really in terms of how they could probably reignite things for maybe fans at home? I think what we're getting onto here is the predictability, I suppose, of F1 at times.
As a fan, I don't think it's ever been less competitive than it is now. And for me, that's the problem. So I think when you get a team where so much of the format is open for the teams to work with, so it's not restricted, not 70% common, it's kind of an open platform for them. When you get one team that's dominating, often they dominate in generations. Yeah. And then if you've got teams that are dominating with great drivers, then they're just very difficult to beat. And I found myself last season particularly kind of sticking around to watch the start of the races and coming back in to watch the end of the races, but not really having much interest in between. And actually, I say that with some sadness, because I think an amazingly competitive or healthy Formula One is good for all motorsport, because it's the pinnacle of motorsport in terms of number of fans around the world, nearly 1 billion fans around the world. So I desperately want it to be exciting and competitive. I think they've done some good stuff. I mean, Liberty Media have come in and put heavy investment behind Formula One, so you see them racing in Las Vegas and racing in Miami, and the show they put on is absolutely incredible. And you know, I say they're doing more street circuits, and they're looking at different ways of qualifying, and you know, we've seen a remarkable amount of Formula One noise in the off season. I mean, it feels like, you know, they've been good in lots of column inches over the last few months for a number of reasons. So they've kept the interest up, but yeah, I think they just need to correct the competitiveness of it. Yeah,
I mean, so when we're looking at the competitive nature of the sport, Max Verstappen, for example, been dominating now for a period of time. Lewis Hamilton had his, as you said, his
7 times.
Seven times. Well, I mean, he dominated for his period. If you put Max Verstappen in a Formula E car, do you think he would dominate Formula E?
No.
Why?
No. So first of all, I think Max is an incredible driver. Yeah. Incredible driver. And the combination of incredible driver, incredible car is allowing Max to dominate. And you said it there. We saw it with Lewis as well. You know, incredible car, and Lewis is an incredible driver, remains an incredible driver. But I think it would just be counter to anything we've ever seen before. Because one, and you said it, first of all, he'd have to come into Formula E and learn to drive a Formula E car. They're actually very different to Formula One cars. So, and every driver that's ever come from Formula One into Formula E or gone the other way has said that it's so completely different to drive. So he'd have to come into Formula E, get used to driving the car. That's the first thing. Then he'd have to be in a team that has an incredible powertrain. And even if you have an incredible powertrain, because 70% of the cars are common, as you've seen, it's wafer thin, the gaps between the teams. I think in the first 3 races of this year, you've had 3 winners, we mentioned that, but you've had 7 different people on the podium in the first 3 races of this year. So I think if Max came in, he's an incredible driver, he'd get used to driving the car fairly quickly. Let's say he became very capable quickly of driving the car. I think he'd definitely win races, and I think he'd be really excited. By the way, my phone's on. If he wants to call, I'll take the call. But I think nobody's dominated in Formula E in the way that he has in Formula One. So I think it would be illogical to think that he'd come in and break what is 10 seasons worth of hundreds of races. I don't think that would happen.
I don't know. I mean, he's a great. He's special, and I think I take your point. I had a good chat with Jehan Daruvla on the way back from Saudi, actually, and you know, he had a really good first race out there.
Yeah, he did. He did well.
Especially in quali, did very well.
Yeah, he did really well.
But little brief chat there about the difference between coming from F1 into FE and the handling of the car and the things that he's getting used to. But we are talking about Max Verstappen.
No, I'd say he's an amazing driver, and he is special. So as we said earlier, it's where driver meets the machine in the window. When they get that machine in the window and they've got a great driver in the seat, I think you get these periods of time, whether it was Michael Schumacher or whether it's Lewis Hamilton and whether it's now Max Verstappen. But we've also seen great drivers in cars that aren't quite so competitive just disappear off of our radar. So I'm not undermining Max anymore. I think he's an amazing racing driver. If you're Max right now, all you're interested in is staying in that great car and ratcheting up more and more kind of driver titles, because let's face it, we're coming into the new season. You might as well, unless he's ill or there gets an injury or there's something else that goes on that we're that none of us expect. You might as well be putting the trophy in his cabinet. He could put it in now. Yeah. So 100%, 99%, he's already got that one in the bag for next season.
Next season, you think it's in the bag, no matter what?
I don't know if you're being serious. Of course it's in the bag.
I'm asking you a serious question. Yeah,
90,
you think it's done?
Done. Done. 99%, and I say, unless he's injured or something crazy happens, 99% he gets that trophy. He gets to. I tell you what, if he doesn't win it, there's 20 drivers in Formula One.
Yeah.
If he doesn't win it, so there's 19 other drivers.
Yeah.
If any one of the other 19 drivers wins it, we'll give $250,000 to the charity of the choice of the other driver that wins it.
$250,000.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how convinced you are. $250,000.
Well, it wouldn't be the worst day in the office to give a load of money to charity.
I mean,
if you're honest. But absolutely, he is nailed on to win that season, which is why, for me as a fan, a fan of Formula E and Formula One, I know I'm going to turn up to Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
I run Formula E. You're in the presentation team there. Neither of us have any idea who's going to win that race, right?
Clue.
So I'm quite excited by that. I know as a Formula One fan, the season's about to start, and yeah, I'll watch it, and the fanfare and everything goes with it. But I absolutely already know who's winning. You can't win 19 out of 21 races in one season. Go in the off season, bit of development on the cars, come back for the next one, and not win it. I just can't see it.
So just to be clear, if Leclerc turns up maybe, or Lando Norris produces in that McLaren, and they manage to go and win that title,
which would be amazing.
Me and you can go and visit him and give him $250,000 check for his charity.
Yeah, if Lando wins, we'll go and visit him, give him $250,000 for his charity, and he can, absolutely, no questions asked.
Jeff, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure.
No, brilliant. Great
Thanks
to see you
for your
again.
time.
Yeah, take care.